going to start about 6 lines from the bottom on Mem Beis Amud Beis, so 42b. Okay.
I may sync this up, but I
okay.
That mimicking.
All right. The Gemara says, "V'hotzi osa shelo yotzi acheres ima." The pasuk says, "V'hotzi osa," you should take it, the paraduma out. From there, we learn out that you may not take anything else out with it. Kiditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah, lo haisa para rotza latzes in motziin ima shechora shelo yomu shechora shachtu. So if the paraduma refused to walk along the procession to Harazesim, and it wouldn't walk, so normally you might take another cow and walk it in front of it, and then it would follow. We're forbidden to do so. You may not take a shechora, another a dark cow, one which is not red, and take it out with it. So that people should not be confused and think that even the shechora, the dark cow, is permitted to be being shechted as a paraduma. And even if you were to find another red cow, you may not take the red cow out with it, so that none should say that they shechted 2 paradumas at the same time. And we said yesterday that would be forbidden to do because we require the Kohen's full concentration, full focus, and you cannot focus on 2 things at the same time. Rabbi Omer lo min Hashem hu zeh, ela mishum shenemar osa levada. Rabbi says that there's not a logical reason behind this. Rather, it's because the pasuk says osa levada. You have to take the paraduma out by itself. So regardless of whatever reason you might come up with, you're not allowed to take anything else with it. The Tanakama haksiv osa. So asks the Gemara, according to the Tanakama as well, it says in the pasuk osa. So we should say that the pasuk is what teaches us that you may not take anything else out with it, and not because of the logic that we just said. Answers the Gemara, man Tanakama Reb Shimon hi the Darish Taima Dikra. So the Tanakama is Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon is the one who holds that you can interpret a pasuk, meaning when we have a pasuk in the Torah that gives us an isur or a mitzvah, when it gives us a commandment, we can interpret the logic behind that commandment, and we can use that. To explain and even to learn out new halachos based on that logic. So Rashi tells us the source for Rabbi Shimon is as follows: there's a halacha in the Torah that one may not take a collateral from a widow. Now the Torah tells us one may not take a collateral from a widow. So from a literal reading of the pasuk, that would teach us that in all cases it would be forbidden to do so. What's the reason behind it? It doesn't matter. Rabbi Shimon, however, says no. We can follow the logic of the pasuk, and the logic is as follows: the halacha is that if one takes a collateral from a poor person, he has to return it to him each night. The Torah's example is if you take the pillow or the blanket of a poor person, it has to be returned to him each night. And if one were to take the collateral from a widow and he has to return it to her each and every night, he will damage her reputation by having this strange man constantly entering, coming and leaving, coming and going from her house. So Rabbi Shimon says that based on this logic, if that's the reason why the Torah said you may not take it, then if it were to be a rich widow, where you would not be commanded to return the collateral each night, then it would actually be permitted. So Rabbi Shimon says that we can follow the logic of the pasuk, and we can actually learn out new halachos based on this logic, meaning we can say that the Torah only applied this isur, even though the Torah did not equivocate, the Torah did not differentiate between a rich widow or a poor widow, we can ourselves differentiate between the two of them, meaning we can interpret the pasuk. Now, how does that apply in our case? So Rabbi Shimon says that the only reason why the Torah said you may not take another cow out with it is because people might be confused to think that the second cow is also being offered up as a parah aduma. But my beinayu. So what difference is there between Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakama? Ika beinayu, going on to 43a, the apik chamor bahada. If we were to take out a donkey together with this paraduma, so if we were to lead a donkey before it so that the paraduma would follow, so then according to Rebbe, who says that we don't interpret the pasuk, and if the Torah forbade us from bringing any other animal out, even a donkey would be forbidden. However, according to Rabbi Shimon, that we can interpret the Isser in the pasuk, so then we can say that the Isser obviously would only apply to a cow, right? Because one can make a mistake and confuse and say that if they brought out another cow, that cow is also being slaughtered as the paraduma. However, nobody would confuse a donkey and think that the donkey is being brought as a paraduma. Therefore, the Isser in the Torah would not apply according to Rabbi Shimon because we can interpret the pasuk. Okay, the Gemara now continues. We're going to continue interpreting the psukim, and like we mentioned, like the Gemara said yesterday, some of the psukim are to be interpreted directly, and some of the psukim are coming to contradict and to change the halacha of the pasuk before it. So the Gemara is going to spend an entire amud on these psukim, which are coming to change the psukim before them. V'shachad osa. So the pasuk says, "You shall slaughter it, the paraduma, shelo yishchot acheres ima." So it's an exclusion. It's saying that you may not shecht any other animal at the same time as you're shechting the paraduma. Lifanav, before him, so before the Kohen. L'rav shelo yasiach daito mimenu, l'shmuel she'ezar shochet ve'elazar roeh. So we already mentioned yesterday, there's a machlokus between Rav and Shmuel, whether a zar, a non-Kohen, may shech the paraduma. So according to Rav, that a zar may not perform the shechita, then this that it says lefanav, before Elazar, which we were troubled by yesterday, because why does the Torah have to say it's done before him? If he is the one doing the shechita, then obviously it's before him. So lefanav is teaching me shelo yasiach daito mimena, that he may not remove his focus or his concentration from the animal even for a moment. Shmuel, but according to Shmuel, it's actually coming to teach me that the Torah is telling me that it's permitting, a zar is permitting a non-Kohen to be the one to do the shechita as long as Elazar is supervising. The Gemara continues, V'lokach Elazar HaKohen midama be'etzba'o. So Elazar HaKohen should be the one to take the blood with his finger and to sprinkle it towards the Mishkan or towards the Beis Hamikdash. L'Shmuel lahadure le'Elazar. According to Shmuel, then we understand why the pasuk has to say Elazar is to be the one to do it, because the shechita was kosher with anyone. The shechita was kosher done by anyone. So therefore, the Torah has to specify now that the blood must be given to Elazar HaKohen, and Elazar has to be the one to do the shechita. The zrika, the blood being sprayed towards the Mishkan. L'Rav have a miyut achar miyut, ve'en miyut achar miyut ela l'rabos ta'afilu kohen hedyot. So according to Rav, this pasuk would fall into the category of an exclusion following an exclusion, which the Gemara or the Gemara says, and as one of the 13 principles, it actually reverses itself, and it becomes an inclusion instead of an exclusion. So this that it says Elazar is to be the one to do it, actually will then serve as an inclusion, that it doesn't have to be the skan, it does not have to be the assistant Kohen Gadol. Rather, it is kosher even with the Kohen Hedyot, that the avoda may be done by any Kohen, even a Kohen Hedyot. V'lokach HaKohen eitz erez ve'ezov u'shni tolas. The Kohen takes the cedar wood, the ezov, the grass, and the red wool. L'Shmuel da'afilu b'Kohen Hedyot. According to Shmuel, it's teaching me that it may be done even by a Kohen Hedyot, again by the same process of an exclusion following another exclusion, which reverses itself and becomes an inclusion. The Rav itzrich. According to Rav, however, it's not another exclusion. Rather, here the Torah had to write it because I might have thought salkadaita chamina I might have thought even alav gufa de para ninhu loli boy kohen. I might have thought that since the cedar wood and the grass and the red wool are not actually a part of the paraduma itself, they're separate from the paraduma. I might have thought that perhaps they do not require a kohen at all. Kamash Malon. Therefore, the Torah has to write that it requires a kohen and it must be done by a kohen. Okay, v'chibes begadav hakohen. The kohen has to wash his garments, meaning he has to be tovel his garments in the mikveh because they become tameh as well. Why does it say begadav his clothing? To teach me bikihuno that the kohen must be wearing his bigdei kahuna at the time, his vestments at the time that he performs the avodah of the paraduma. V'tameh hakohen ad ha'erev, kohen bikihuno ledoros. So this that the Torah repeats itself, the kohen will be tameh until evening, is to teach me again that the kohen is required to wear his bigdei kahuna. And this that the Torah repeats itself is ledoros, to teach me that for all future generations as well, the kohen is required to wear his bigdei kahuna. So the Gemara says that yesterday we brought a machlokas whether for all future generations the avoda is kosher with any kohen hedyot, with any kohen, or perhaps the opposite, and for all generations it requires the avoda to be done by the kohen gadol. So the Gemara says, according to the opinion that for all generations we go down a level, meaning the original para in the Torah has to be done by the skan, by the assistant kohen gadol, but however in future generations it may be done by any kohen, even by a kohen hedyot. So then we understand why the Torah has to repeat itself and say that although it can be done by any kohen, the kohen is required to be wearing his bigdei kahuna. So we understand why the Torah has to repeat itself, to teach me that although we go down a level and it's kosher with any kohen, however, he is required to be wearing his bigdei kahuna. Elalamanda amar ledoros, the kohen gadol. However, according to the opinion that says for all generations we go up a level, and we say that it's required to be done by the kohen gadol, so then why would we need the Torah to repeat itself and say that he has to be wearing his bigdei kahuna? Hashta kohen gadol ba'inan. If you're saying we require the kohen gadol to be the one to do the avoda, b'kihuna mibayale, do I need a pasuk to tell me that he has to wear his bigdei kahuna? It should be a kal v'chomer that if Elazar had to wear his bigdei kahuna, so then certainly the kohen gadol should have to wear his bigdei kahuna. Answers the Gemara in milsa da'asya v'kal v'chomer torach v'kosav lakra. At certain times, we will say that although something could have been learned out, could have been extrapolated from a kal v'chomer, nevertheless, the Torah took the time to write it out and to say it explicitly. So this would be one of those cases where, although it could have been learned out from a kal v'chomer, the Torah repeats it explicitly. V'asaf ish tahor es efer hapara v'hiniach. So the pasuk continues and it says that a person, a man who is tahor, will collect the ashes of the paraduma. So it says the Gemara, ish lahachshir hazar. So this that it says ish, a man, is teaching me that even it may be done even by a non-kohen, even by a zar. Tahor lahachshir so isha. This that it says that it must be someone who is pure, someone who is not tameh, that is teaching me that it may even be done by a woman. So this is another example of where the pasuk is coming to contradict the word before it. Right? The pasuk starts off by saying ish, a man, which earlier we interpreted to be an exclusion of a man and not a woman. However, when the Torah says tahor, it's teaching me anyone who is pure, and that's including that even a woman is valid to perform the avoda, to perform the collecting of the ashes. V'hiniach, and he shall place the ashes aside. Mi sheyesh bo das lahaniach. That's teaching me it has to be someone who is aware of the actions that he is doing. Yatzu cheresh shota v'katan she'ein bahen das lahaniach. It's excluding a cheresh, a deaf mute, and a katan, or a minor, or one who is insane, where they do not have the das, the understanding to be able to understand what their actions that they're doing. So they would be excluded, that they may not be the ones to perform any of the actions of the paraduma. Tanan Hassam, we learned in the Mishnah, Hakol Kesherin Lekadesh, Chutz Mecheres Shota V'Katan, all are kosher to place the ashes upon the water, to be Mekadesh, the water for of the paraduma, to be able to use that water then to sprinkle on the person who's tameh. So all are kosher to do so, except for a cheres shota v'katan, like we just said. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan uposel be'isha, be'isha ubandrogenos. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees, and he learns that the word ish is telling me that even a katan, even a minor, is permitted to perform the placing of the ashes in the water, to then use that water to sprinkle on the person who's tameh. However, a woman or an androgynous or an androgyne would be excluded, that they may not be the ones to place the ashes upon the water. So we have a machlokas whether a woman is included or excluded. My time of the Rabbanan, what's the reasoning for the Rabbanan that hold that a minor is excluded but a woman is included? So it says, they shall take for the one who is impure from a dead body, from the ashes of the paraduma, and then they shall place those ashes upon the water. So hanach de pasli lecha ba'asifa, pasli lecha b'kiddush. So those who are excluded from collecting the ashes, they are likewise excluded from being the ones to place those ashes upon the water. Namely, a cheres shota v'katan, right? A minor was excluded from collecting the ashes, so he would likewise be excluded from placing the ashes upon the water. And those who were included and they were kosher, they were valid for collecting the ashes, namely a woman, then she would likewise be valid for placing the ashes upon the water. Rabbi Yehuda, who disagrees. So what's his logic for disagreeing? If that's the case, then the Torah should have said, if it's telling me that only those who are kosher for collecting the ashes are valid for placing the ashes upon the water, the Torah should have said v'lakach, and he shall take, rather than the plural of v'lakchu, and they shall take. So my v'lakchu, why does it say the plural? So it's coming to include that there is someone who, although he was invalid for collecting the ashes, he would be valid for placing the ashes upon the water. Dafilu katan the pasli l'cha hasam, even the minor who was invalid for collecting the ashes, and Rabbi Yehuda agrees to that. Hacha kosher, here he would be valid because the plural of v'lakchu, they shall take, is including someone who was earlier considered invalid. Isha minale. So what about the fact that he excludes a woman from doing the kiddush, from placing the ashes upon the water? Because the pasuk says v'nasan v'lo v'nasta. Since the Torah uses the masculine version of v'nasan, and he shall place, rather than v'nasna and she shall place, so that is teaching me that a woman is excluded. V'rabanan ikasav rachmana v'lokach v'nasan. So according to the Rabbanan, that a woman is valid. So the Rabbanan say, if it had said v'lokach v'nasan, it had used the singular version for both parts of the pasuk, and he shall take and he shall place. Hava amina ad shakil chad v'yahiv chad. If it had used that, so they are disputing Rabbi Yehuda's logic. Rabbi Yehuda said that the fact that the Torah used the plural version of they shall take, it's coming to include the minor. The Rabbanan say no, it's not coming to include the minor at all. So then why did the Torah use the plural version? To teach me as follows. I might have thought that perhaps it has to be the same person who takes the ashes. He must be the same person to place the ashes upon the water. So I might have thought that it has to be the same person. So therefore, the Torah, kasav rachmana v'lakchu, therefore the Torah uses the plural version, they shall take, which is referring to multiple people, as opposed to he shall place. So therefore, it's clearly telling me that it does not have to be the same person who collects the ashes to be the one to place the ashes upon the water. If the Torah had said, use the plural version for both, to say they shall collect the ashes and they shall place the ashes upon the waters, Havamina adashakli tray v'yohavi tray. So then I might have thought that you actually require two people to do the collecting of the ashes and two people to place the ashes upon the water. So therefore the Torah writes, they shall take the ashes, but he shall place the ashes upon the water, to teach me that even if there's two people who collect the ashes and only one person who places the ashes upon the water, so clearly it's not going to be the same person who has done the collecting to be the one placing the ashes upon the water. So that's teaching me that even in that case, it is valid. So this is referring to the actual act of sprinkling the water upon the person who is tameh from a dead body, and it is saying that the pasuk says that it's done through dipping an azov, a clump of grass, into the water, and ish tahor, it has to be a person, a man who is tahor, to do that action. So lirabanan ish velo isha. According to the Rabbanan, so again, this is another example of where the psukim, each pasuk comes to reverse the pasuk that is before it, that it follows. So here, where according to the Rabbanan, who earlier said that a woman is valid for placing the ashes upon the water, so now the pasuk is coming to reverse itself and say that, however, for sprinkling the water upon the person who is tameh, that requires a man, and a woman would be excluded. So ish velo isha. Tahor lahachshir sakatan, and this that it says a person who is pure is coming to include the katan, the minor who was earlier excluded. So now it's coming to include him. So it's coming to exclude the woman who was earlier included, and it's coming to include the minor who was earlier excluded. And Rabbi Huda is going to hold the same thing, that it's coming to include the one who was excluded, and it's coming to exclude the one who was included. However, it's the reverse. Rabbi Yehuda ish velo katan, tahor lahachshir isha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, ish is coming to tell me is coming to exclude a minor who he earlier included. Tahor, pure, is coming to include the woman who he earlier excluded. Meisive. So the Gemara poses a question. Hakol kasherin lahazos, all are kosher to do, all are valid to do the hazah, sprinkling the water on the person who is tameh, chutz mi tumtum v'androgenos, except for a tumtum, one whose genitals are covered over, so it's not clear if he's male or female, an androgenos, one who has both male and female genitalia, v'isha, v'katan, and a woman and a minor. And a woman, I'm sorry, the isha and a woman. The katan sheish bo das, isha misayato, a katan who is older, is closer to being of the age of becoming a man. So he is a woman may help him to do the sprinkling of the water, as long as he has basic knowledge of the actions that he's doing. So isha misayato umaze, a woman can help him perform the action of sprinkling the water, and he sprinkles the water upon the person who's tameh. So it's teaching me two halachos. Number one, that the katan is valid for sprinkling the water, and number two, that a woman may assist him in doing so. Continuing on to Mem Gimel Amud Beis, and going to 43b, v'lo polig Rabbi Yehuda, and we don't find that we don't find in this brisa that's being quoted that Rabbi Yehuda argues. So it seems that Rabbi Yehuda would agree that a katan, a minor, would be valid. Amar Abaye kiven da Amar Mar mashma motzi miyad mashma motzi miyad mashma memela polig. So Abaye says that although it's not stated explicitly in the brisa, a shota is not mentioned in this, neither is the cheresh, assuming that they can never reach a place where they would be aware of their actions. However, a katan, as he gets older and he's close to the age of being an adult, so then we can say that he becomes aware of his actions gradually. So there is a point where, although he's a minor, we can say that he's at least aware. He may not have reached full das, full understanding like an adult, but he is aware of his actions. However, for a deaf mute or a shota or an insane person, so then they never improve at all, so they're not aware of their actions at all. So Abaye now says that since we follow this pattern of each pasuk comes to reverse the pasuk which it followed, the pasuk that preceded it. So therefore, it must be that Rabbi Yehuda argues, even though it's not stated explicitly in the Brisa, although it's not stated explicitly, nevertheless, it must be that he argues because that's the pattern that we're following. Okay, the Gemara continues, V'hiza hatahor al hatame, tahor michlal shehu tameh. So it says that the person who is tahor, and again, it's a repetition because we earlier said it has to be someone who's tahor, someone who's pure. Now it repeats itself and says that again, it has to be someone who is pure. What's that teaching me? Michlal shehu tameh is teaching me that earlier this person was tameh. Since it's stating that now he is pure, that's teaching me that very shortly before this he was tameh. Now, who is the person who shortly before this was tameh and now he's pure? That is what we refer to as a tful yom. That a person who is tameh and he goes to the mikvah, he immerses in the mikvah, and he for the remainder of that day, he is considered a tful yom. Is what we call a tful yom, someone who immersed that day. So until nightfall, he is of a lower level of tumah. He's a sheni l'tumah. He's a secondary tumah. However, he is considered tameh to a certain extent until nightfall. So here the Torah is coming to tell us that although normally a tful yom may not do any sort of avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, in this case, sprinkling the water of the paraduma on the person who is tameh is not considered an avoda, and even a tful yom, limed al tful yom shekosher b'para, is teaching me that even a tful yom is kosher to do the actions of the paraduma. Amar b'asi ki havu ba Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish b'para. Rav Asi says that this matter was so convoluted and so complicated that when Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, two great Torah scholars, were involved in going through the halachos of the paraduma, lo maski minei ella kemai demasik ta'ala mibei karva. They were only able to take out of it like Rashi says, like a fox would take out, attached to its paws, from a freshly plowed field. So a fox that runs across a freshly plowed field will take a certain amount of dirt, will clump onto its paws, and that's all that they were able to take out of it. Ella Amri mashma motzi miyad umashma mimela. Rather, they said that each pasuk is coming to reverse the pasuk before it, and it's a very complicated procedure. Tani Tana Kamedu Rabbi Yochanan. So the Tana taught before Rabbi Yochanan, all shchitos are kosher, are valid, done by a non-kohen, meaning of any korban, except for that of the paraduma. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, Poktani Levra. Rabbi Yochanan taught him, go and teach this outside the Beis Medrash. This is not to be taught inside. Lo matzinu shchita bizar pisula. So Rabbi Yochanan said, it's impossible. We never find any shchita that is pasul if it's done by a zar, by a non-kohen. Shchita is always kosher, even done by a non-kohen. So Rav Yochanan refused to accept this teaching. For Rav Yochanan, lomi baye letana de lotzayis, and Rav Yochanan, it's not enough that he did not accept the teaching of the Tana. Ela afilo le rabbe lotzayis, even to his own Rebbe, he did not accept his teaching. The Amar Rav Yochanan mishum Rav Shimon ben Yehotzadak. Rav Yochanan taught in the name of Rav Shimon ben Yehotzadak, Shchitas para bizar pesula. That Rav Shimon ben Yehotzadak said that the shchita of the paraduma is pasul, is invalid if done by a non-kohen. Ani Omer Kishera, and Rav Yochanan himself disagrees with it. He says, I disagree with this teaching. Lo matzinu shchita shepsula bizar. We have never found any sort of shchita, any case where shchita of a korban is pasul, is invalid if done by a zar. Okay. Balo etzel paro shnia. So now we're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the Kohen Gadol comes back to his bull, the bull that is the private bull of the Kohen Gadol, and he does a second vidur, a second confession on the bull. And if you noted the difference between the first confession, where he said that he's coming to confess his own sins. In the second confession, he says that he's confessing his own sins, but also that of all the Kohanim. So asks the Gemara, "Ma'ishna bevido rishon delo amar ubnei Aaron am kidoshecha." So why did he not simply include all the Kohanim in his first vidur? Right? He could have said what he says in the second. He could have said, "Chotasi avisi pashati, I sinned ani ubeisi." Right, I and my household, right, Ubnei Aaron am kidoshecha, and the sons of Aaron, right, your holy nation, right. So why did he have to separate into two separate viduyim, into two separate confessions? Why not include it all into one? So it says Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel, was taught and before Rabbi Shmuel, Kachi midas hadin no senes. This is the way it is proper to be done. That yavo zakai v'yechaper alachayev. Let someone who is innocent. He should come and atone for one who is guilty, meaning and let not someone who is guilty come and attempt to atone for others who are guilty. Meaning the Kohen Gadol first has to do his own confession for his own sins, whereby he gets atonement for his own sins. Once he has been cleansed of his own sins, and he's then considered pure, then he can come and attempt to atone for the sins of the Kohanim. So that's why it has to be divided into two viduyim, into two separate confessions. The first confession is for his own sins. Once he's been cleansed of his own sins, then he can come and confess on behalf of all the Kohanim, Bnei Aaron, Am Kedoshecha, on behalf of all the other Kohanim. Okay, continuing on to the Mishnah now. Yeah.
What about the rest of the Israelites?
Excellent. So the rest of the Israelites go into the third confession, not done on the bull, because the bull is the private korban of the Kohen Gadol. Rather, that confession goes onto the Sa'ir, on the Sa'ir Lashem. We had the two goats, right? And there was a gorel. One is the Sa'ir Mishalech, the other one is the Sa'ir. So the confession, goes on to the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, goes on to the bull which is sent away. Shachto v'kibal b'mizrak es damo, v'nosno l'mishu hu memares bo. So he does shchita on the bull, okay, and he collects the blood, and he gives it to the one who is responsible now to stand and mix the blood. Al harovad haravi shebehechal, on the fourth row of the heichal. Kadesh lo yikrosh, so the blood should not congeal. So the reason for this is that the Torah, again, we learned that anything related to the avoda of Yom Kippur has to be done exactly the way the Torah specifies. And the Torah specifies that the shchita of the par has to be done before the ketoras, which is brought into the Kodesh Kodashim. So the avoda of the par is actually split into two. First, the Kohen Gadol does we do the shchita of the par and the Kabbalah collecting the blood. Then we pause from the avoda of the par, we switch to the avoda of the ketoras, and then we go back to the avoda of the par to then bring the blood of the par into the Kodesh Kodashim. So now we have a problem, though. The blood, if left by itself, will congeal, right? If the blood congeals, then obviously it won't be able to be used for the sprinkling of the blood onto before the aron and all the other process of the blood. So therefore, there was a Kohen who was appointed to stand and mix the blood. So he would constantly mix the blood so that it would not congeal. So and then the Kohen Gadol goes off to perform the avodah of the ketoras, and this Kohen is mixing the blood until the Kohen Gadol returns. So the Mishnah stated that he stands on the fourth row. So Rashi explains that the tiles, the marble tiles of the Azara of the Beis Hamikdash were set into rows. So he stands on the fourth row, and the Gemara's initial understanding of the Mishnah is that he stands inside the Heichal, so inside the building of the Beis Hamikdash, on the fourth row, inside the entrance of the Heichal. And we'll see why that matters in a bit. Natal Machta, so the Kohen Gadol now takes a shovel, va'ala l'rosh hamizbeach, he goes up to the top of the Mizbeach, upina gecholim elach ve'elach, and he spreads apart the coals of the fire that was burning there. And he takes from the coals that are inside, on the inside of the pile, on the inside of the fire. Those are the hottest coals. So he takes those coals. And then he places that shovel of coals. Also, he places that down on the floor of the Azara. And we'll see why he has to do that, because he's going to have to take the Ketores, and the Ketores is taken as a double handful. So the Kohen is going to need both of his hands, right, to be able to collect the Ketores. So he has to put down the shovel of coals so both his hands are free. On all days, he would use a silver shovel, and then he would pour it. He would pour the coals into a gold shovel. And the reason for this is because the gold is a very soft metal, and if you use the gold to stick it directly into the fire, then the gold will melt, and you'll have to replace it very often. And therefore, we used a silver one, and then it was poured into a shovel of gold. However, on Yom Kippur, we do not want to require the Kohen Gadol. Rashi explains that we try and limit the avoda as much as possible. We make the avoda as easy as possible on the Kohen Gadol. Mishum chulsha, the Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol is weak. Right? We have to recall he's fasting, right? And he stayed up the whole night. Okay, and generally speaking, the Kohen Gadol, being the greatest of the Kohanim, was not a young man. Right, so generally speaking, he was an older person, and we want to make it as easy as possible on the Kohen Gadol, so as not to burden him on Yom Kippur, because there's a lot of avoda that he needs to do. It's a long avoda, and he's weak, so therefore we make it as easy as possible. So so therefore on Yom Kippur, he only uses one shovel, so he immediately uses the one of gold, and is going to bring that one directly. On all days, he would collect 4 kav of a measurement of 4 kav of coals, and then he would pour it into a shovel that only holds 3 kav, so that he gets the best of the coals.
How much is it kav, Rabbi? In our terms?
I forget the exact measurements. You know what? I forget the exact measurements. It's not a huge amount. Rabbi Yossi Omer b'chol yom chote b'shel sa u'ma'ara b'toch shloshes kabin. Rabbi Yossi says on a regular day he took a full sa, which is 6 kav, and then he pours it into a shovel which is half the size of 3 kavin. Again, on Yom Kippur, we want to limit it as much as possible, so he uses a shovel which is 3 kav, and then he brings that directly into the Kodesh Kadashim. On all days, it was made of a thicker metal, so that it would last longer. V'hayom kala, on Yom Kippur, we use a thinner metal. It should be lighter, again, to make it easier for the Kohen Gadol. He's going to be carrying it in one hand, and in his weaker hand, and therefore we made it as light as possible. On all days, it was a short handle, and he would carry it in front of him. And on Yom Kippur, we used a longer handle so he can support it on his arm to make it easier for him to carry it. Zahava Yarok, B'Hayom Adam. On all days, the gold was it says a green gold. It means like a yellowish gold. B'Hayom Adam on Yom Kippur was like a rose gold. That's considered a Divrei Rabbi Menachem. That's the statement of Rabbi Menachem. It's considered a higher quality. So it's to show the chashivos of Yom Kippur. B'chol yom makriv pras b'shachris u'pras bin harbayim. V'hayom mosif moloch chofnov. On all days, the Kohen Gadol brings a half, a pras, a half of the measurement in the morning and a half of a measurement in the afternoon. That's brought on the Mizbeach Hazav, on the gold Mizbeach. V'hayom mosif moloch chofnov. And on Yom Kippur, we add a double handful, and that's going to be brought into the Kodesh Kadashim. B'chol yom hoisa daka. On all days it was ground. The ketoris was ground into a fine powder. V'hayom daka min hadaka. And on Yom Kippur, since the Torah specifies a fine powder, therefore we grind it twice, so it should be doubly fine. On all days, the Kohanim would go up on the eastern side of the Kevesh, and they would come down on the western side, so they would make a full circuit around the Mizbeach. So they would start on the eastern side and then walk all the way around to the western side. V'hayom Kohen Gadol ole ba'emtza v'yored ba'emtza, and on Yom Kippur the Kohen Gadol would go up at the in the center of the ramp, and he would come directly down. He did not have to make a circuit around the Mizbeach. And Rashi explains that we want to show that the Kohen Gadol on all days the Kohanim have to show deference to the Shechina. They want to show that they're being humble, the humility before Hashem, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On Yom Kippur, we want to show Klal Yisrael that the Kohen Gadol is a beloved son of Hashem, and he's coming to atone for all of Klal Yisrael. So he walks up directly in the center, like a son would be comfortable in his father's house. Rabbi Yehuda Omer la'olam Kohen Gadol ola ba'emtza v'yored ba'emtza. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the Kohen Gadol always, on every day, went up in the center and came down in the center. B'chol yom Kohen Gadol mekadesh yadav v'raglo min hakior v'hayom min hakiton shel zav. On all days, the Kohen Gadol would wash his hands and feet from the kior, just like all the other Kohanim. V'hayom min hakiton shel zav. On Yom Kippur, it was done with a golden pitcher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer la'olam Kohen Gadol mekadesh yadav v'raglo min hakiton shel zav. Rabbi Yehuda says the Kohen Gadol always used the golden pitcher to show the chashivas of the Kohen Gadol. B'chol yom hayu sham arba ma'arachos. On all days there were 4 fires. There were 4 separate fires on the Mizbeach, and the Gemara will go through what they were. V'hayom chamesh. On Yom Kippur there were 5. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi omer b'chol yom shalosh v'hayom arba. Rabbi Yossi says on all days there were 3, and today 4. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'chol yom shtayim. On all days there were 2, v'hayom shalosh, and today 3. And the Gemara is going to explain what each ma'aracha, what the machlokes is, and what each ma'aracha, what each fire was used for. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll pick up with this tomorrow.
Okay.
So the Kohanim